Welcome back to another episode of the Community Made podcast. This podcast is for women who want to heal from sexual abuse. So we talk all things healing, nervous system regulation, how to find closure, and so much more so that you can really thrive after you have experienced this type of trauma. Today, inside this podcast episode, we are going to talk about the misconceptions that are out there around finding closure for sexual abuse survivors. So let's go ahead and get started with this. This is something that is near and dear to me because I've believed some of these misconceptions myself, but also I've had to have these discussions with my clients as well. And I think it's just because when we look online, especially online, and we look at the mainstream media that's out there about healing from this type of abuse, that there's so much black and white going on that when we think that we're like triggered or we feel sad or we're still having a bad day, or there's things that we thought that we healed, but then they show back up, we think, oh my God, there's something wrong with us. Like I should be healed by now. I should have this closure. I shouldn't have these feelings about it. And so I feel like we really need to wake up on the truth of what healing actually looks like, especially for this kind of trauma. So again, I have bought into a lot of this. I'm not going to act like I haven't. And then I have learned over the last 10 years of my own healing that this is absolute bullshit. And then of course, helping my clients, you really learn that a lot of the black and white thinking that's out there about healing is also bullshit. So let's dive into these because I think they're so important. And number one is that once you're supposedly healed or you find closure, that you're never going to be triggered, you're never going to have flashbacks, you're never going to have nightmares, you'll never be sad, you'll never be angry, and you'll just be happy and joyful and blissful all the time, like you're floating on cloud nine, like all the time. Okay, look. Again, I used to believe this. I used to believe that once I healed enough, I would get into this space of I would always be happy. I would never have a bad day. And all of these like really like blissful, naive things. The reality is that life still happens even though you've healed. So some things are still going to piss you off. You are still going to have nightmares and flashbacks and deal with those things. You're also going to be potentially triggered in other ways, not just flashbacks and triggers or flashbacks and nightmares. It's not always going to be that way. The thing that's important to notice is that it's not that they go away. It's not that you won't ever have heavy emotions. It's truly about having the right tools and resources to be able to handle life when it still comes at you. Now, I would love to say that after so many years of healing from my sexual trauma, I don't have any triggers, especially when it comes to my daughter, and I don't have any bad dreams, and I never get mad and all of that stuff. And the truth is that I still do to this day, okay? And I know that there's a lot out there on how really you shouldn't feel this way, and then if you do feel this way, your manifestations aren't gonna come, and then you're blocking yourself from your happiness and all. You get into like this spiral type of mode because we believe this misconception. And the thing is that the more that you allow yourself to feel the feelings that you're feeling so that you can move on, the faster you're going to come into your manifestations that you truly desire. So again, just because you heal, it doesn't mean that you're never supposed to have negative emotions or heavy emotions. You'll never be triggered. You'll never have nightmares and things like that. That's just not the case. And it is not that final, unfortunately, right? Healing is a journey, which is also another misconception that I also bought into. That healing was like a destination that you magically arrived at and everything was going to be better. The thing is that when you first begin healing, it really does suck. Okay. There's no other way around it. It really does suck. When you get to the space though, that things start to kind of get better for you. You start to become more regulated. You are more emotionally connected to yourself. You're connected to your body and all of those things. It gets a lot better. But what you realize is that as you go on, that really it's a journey. Healing is a journey, and it is a journey that keeps on giving. And so you will be healing forever and ever and ever. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be healed now in this moment. It doesn't mean that you can't have good days and good times and stay focused on that. What it means is that there's going to be things that consistently come up, and that is okay. It's part of the journey. So another misconception about closure, especially with this kind of trauma, is that it's kind of like a breakup, right? Where, when you have a breakup, you like get the revenge body and then you magically run into them in person, and you're a baddie now and they missed out and all of the things, right? Like that's what they kind of show you that closure looks like, even in a breakup, especially like on TV and in movies and things like that, right? It's kind of has that picture of this specific moment that all of a sudden you're going to find closure, and that's going to be that. The thing is that you're not going to find closure that way with healing from sexual abuse. The reality is that if you end up ever confronting your abuser, the likelihood of them apologizing and taking accountability and responsibility for what they did is so low. The reality of, like coming in and having this revenge body and this revenge life, unfortunately, is not usually the norm for sexual abuse survivors. It's usually the opposite. Now, I'm not saying that you're not capable of that. I'm not saying that you can't have that. But I'm saying that if you are depicting in your mind or expecting that this is going to be the type of circumstances that you're going to be able to have to find closure, you might be chasing this for a very long time, and it actually might be keeping you from finding the closure that you truly need in your life. Because the reality is that sometimes confronting someone, especially your abuser, is not the answer. You may really have to decide to move on without ever having that conversation, without ever confronting them, without ever understanding where they're coming from. And so, we might think that that sounds crazy, but as a survivor, you want the whys to all these answers, and you may not get them, and that's completely okay. Another misconception is that you can only find closure from your sexual abuse if it wasn't that brutal or if it didn't happen in your childhood. So let's be really honest, okay? This is just minimizing other people's experience, which is actually a trauma response, right? We're actually trying to compare ourselves to the next person so we can justify our actions and justify our behavior. Well, it wasn't really that bad for them, or it was really that bad for them. Maybe I need to get my shit together, right? Like, I don't have an excuse. I shouldn't be carrying this pain. I shouldn't be having these problems. And really, that's a space of judgment and a space of really shaming yourself for feeling a certain way or having these experiences. I have childhood sexual abuse, and I do feel like I have found closure. And I have found closure based on what I believe closure to actually be, and not this black and white answer, right? So I want to make this very clear as we're talking about this. I experienced abuse from the ages of 3 to 7 years old, and then again at 19 and at 26. Now, not to get into too many details, but I was being physically abused, and then I would go and then it would go into the sexual abuse. So I want you to keep in mind that if we're comparing each other's stories and then minimizing other people and what it is that they went through because we believe it wasn't that bad or it wasn't that brutal, that's actually severing ties from building a community and escaping this isolation that shame brings onto us. You can heal from your sexual abuse, whether it was from your childhood or no matter how brutal it is. Because as you already know, the physical abuse part of it you heal from that. Yes, the scars might remain, but you do heal from that. It's the psychological part of it and the physiological part of it that stays with us. And now that we know so much about healing the body and rewiring the mind, it makes letting go and finding this closure so much easier. So, yes, it is 100% possible. And I want you to know that. And I know that because I've done it, but also I've helped my clients find this type of closure, regardless of how brutal it was or whether or not it happened in their childhood. So I want you to know that it's very much possible for you to heal from your sexual abuse. Okay, before I get into the last misconception, I want to invite you to a free 2-hour workshop that is coming up. And I'm so excited about this. You're going to love it. It is about being able to find closure. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but the name of it has absolutely escaped. Like, I can't even find it on my notes. So the name of it has escaped me, but it's going to be a 2-hour workshop about finding closure. We're going to dismantle the lies about finding closure, what closure really looks like, and 3 transformative steps that can actually get you there. Not only are we going to have this learning, but we're also going to have a journaling session for awareness and integration. We're going to have a meditation so you can experience healing energy right then and there. And then, of course, we are going to close it up with support and coaching. If you would like to join us, the link is going to be down below if you would like to check that out. I am so excited. The event is on Wednesday, September 24th at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. There is going to be a replay available if you are interested in that. So at least I knew that information. All right, let's go to the last misconception that we're going to talk about. So the last misconception is that you can reframe your trauma to mean something else and then you're healed. This is actually not true. In my opinion, I believe that reframing your trauma is actually bypassing. So just because you have given your sexual abuse a different meaning doesn't mean that you necessarily make the flashbacks and the triggers and all of those things go away. You still have to deal with the emotional outbursts, and you still have to deal with what's going on in your body and in your mind. You cannot just pretend that, healing your trauma led you to X, Y, and Z, and now everything is magically better. That's not actually how it works. And reframing your trauma is essentially dangerous to your own healing. And it's really pretending. And I think it's bullshit. And I really struggle when people tell me that you can just reframe your trauma and it all goes away. No, it doesn't. And we know that now, especially with all the research that actually shows that these traumas that happen are really incomplete stress cycles or emotional cycles. And because they're incomplete, they actually end up stuck in our body. So it's really important to understand that while you can reframe certain thoughts and maybe beliefs, that's absolutely true, you're not going to be able to reframe your trauma and have it release from your body. And if you're not going to be able to have it release from your body, that means that your mind is also still holding on to it as well. So reframing your sexual abuse is not going to be the answer. It never has been that way for me, and it's never been that way for my clients. And these are the misconceptions of finding closure for sexual abuse survivors. I would love to hear your thoughts. Leave them down in the comments. Let me know if I missed anything. I would love to hear from you, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.